Hey everyone, we're back with Tuck Everlasting. I think I'm going to read chapters 23 and 24 today. I know yesterday I promised 22 and 23 and I didn't get to 23. So we last left off where Jessie gave Winnie a bottle of the water from the spring and asked her to drink it when she turns 17. And they already had their plan to get May out of the jail. Okay, so that's where we left off. Chapter 23. It was the longest day, mindlessly hot, unspeakably hot, too hot to move or even think. The countryside, the village of Treegap, the wood, all lay defeated. Nothing stirred. The sun was a ponderous circle without edges, a roar without sound. A blazing glare, so thorough and remorseless that even in the Fosters' parlor, with curtains drawn, it seemed an actual presence. You could not shut it out. Winnie's mother and grandmother sat plaintive all afternoon in the parlor, fanning themselves and sipping lemonade, their hair unsettled and their knees loose. It was totally unlike them, this lapse from gentility, and it made them much more interesting. But Winnie didn't stay with them. Instead, she took her own brimming glass to her room and sat in her little rocker by the window. Once, she had hidden Jessie's bottle in a bureau drawer. There was nothing to do but wait. In the hall outside her room, the grandfather's clock ticked deliberately, unimpressed with anyone's impatience. And Winnie found herself rocking to its rhythm, forward, back, tick, tock, tick, tock. She tried to read, but it was so quiet that she couldn't even concentrate. And so she was glad when at last it was time for supper. At least it was something to do, though none of them could even manage more than a nibble. But later, when Winnie went out again to the fence, she saw that the sky was changing. It was not so much clouding up as thickening somehow. From every direction at once, the blank blue gone to haze. And then, as the sun sank reluctantly behind the treetops, the haze hardened to a brilliant brownish yellow. In the wood, the leaves turned underside up, giving the trees a silvery cast. The air was noticeably heavier. It pressed on Winnie's chest and made her breathing difficult. She turned and went back into the cottage. "It's going to rain, I think," she told the prostrate group in the parlor. And the news was received with little moans of gratitude. Everyone went to bed early, closing windows firmly on their way. For outside, though it was almost dark, shreds of a hard brown yellow light lingered on the rims of things, and there was a wind, beginning small gusts that rattled the fence gate and set the trees to rustling. The smell of rain hung sweet in the air. "What a week this has been," said Winnie's grandmother. "Well, thank Lord, it's almost over." And Winnie thought to herself, yes, it's almost over. There were 3 hours to wait before midnight, and nothing whatever to do. Winnie wandered restlessly about her room, sat in her rocker, lay on her bed, counted the ticks of the hall clock. Beneath her excitement, she was thick with guilt. For the second time in 3 short days, though they seemed many more than that, she was about to do something which she knew would be forbidden. She didn't have to ask. Winnie had her own strong sense of rightness. She knew that she could always say afterwards, "Well, you never told me not to." But how silly would that be? Of course, it would never occur to them to include such a thing on their list of don'ts. She could remember them saying it and almost smiled. Now remember, Winifred, don't bite your fingernails. Don't interrupt when someone else is speaking. And don't go down to the jailhouse at midnight to change places with a prisoner. Still, it wasn't really funny. What would happen in the morning when the constable found her in the cell and had to bring her home for the second time? What would they say? Would they ever trust her again? Winnie squirmed sitting in that rocker and swallowed uncomfortably. Well, she would have to make them understand, somehow, without explaining it. The hall clock chimed 11. Outside, the wind had stopped. Everything, it seemed, was waiting. Winnie lay down and closed her eyes. Thinking of Tuck and May, of Miles and Jessie, her heart softened. They needed her to take care of them. For in the funny sort of way that had struck her at first that they were helpless or too trusting, well, something like that. Anyways, they needed her. She would not disappoint them. May would go free. No one would have to find out. Winnie would not have to find out that May could not. But Winnie blocked the picture from her head, the horror that would prove the secret, and instead she turned her thoughts to Jessie. When she was 17, would she? If it was true, would she? And if she did, would she be sorry afterwards? Tuck had said, "It's something you don't find out how you feel until afterwards." But no, it wasn't true. She knew that now here in her bedroom. They were probably crazy after all. But she loved them anyways. They needed her. And thinking this, Winnie fell asleep. She woke with a jerk sometime later and sat up, alarmed. The clock was steadily ticking, and darkness was complete. Outside, the night seemed poison on tiptoe, waiting, holding its breath for the storm. Winnie stole out into the hall and frowned at the clock face in the shadows. And at last, she could make it out, for the black Roman numerals were just barely visible against their white ground. The brass hands glowed faintly, and she peered at them. The long hand snapped forward one more notch. With a loud click, she had not missed her moment. It was 5 minutes until midnight. All right, that was chapter 23. We're going to read chapter 24 now. Leaving the house was so easy that Winnie felt faintly shocked. She had half expected that the instant she put a foot on the stairs, they would leap from their beds and surround her with accusations. But no one stirred. And she was struck by that realization that if she chose, she could slip out night after night without their knowing. The thought made her feel more guilty than ever, that she should once more take advantage of their trust. But tonight, this one last time, she had to. There was no other way. She opened the door and slipped out into the heavy August night. Leaving the cottage was like leaving something real and moving into a dream. Her body felt weightless, and she seemed to float down the path to the gate. Jessie was there, waiting. Neither of them spoke. He took her hand, and they ran together, lightly down the road, past other sleeping cottages, into the dim and empty center of the village. The big glass windows here were lidded, eyes that didn't care, that barely saw them, and barely gave them back reflections. The blacksmith shop, the mill, the church, the stores, so busy and alive in daylight, were hunched and deserted now. Dark piles and shapes without purpose or a meaning. And then ahead, Winnie saw the jailhouse. Its new wood still unpainted, lamplight spilling through a window at the front. And there, in the cleared yard behind it, like a great L upside down, the gallows. The sky flashed white, but this time it wasn't heat lightning. For a few moments later, a low mumble still far away announced at last the storm was coming. A fresh breeze lifted Winnie's hair, and from somewhere in the village behind them a dog barked. Two shadows detached themselves from the gloom as Winnie and Jessie came up. Tuck pulled her to him and hugged her hard, and Miles squeezed her hand. No one said a word. Then the four of them crept to the back of the building. Here, too high for Winnie to see into, was a barred window through which, from the room in front, light glowed faintly. Winnie peered up at the blackness of the bars, with the dim gold of the light between. Into her head came lines from an old poem. Stone walls do not a prison make, nor iron bars a cage. Over and over the lines repeated themselves in her head till they were altogether meaningless. Another roll of thunder sounded. The storm was moving nearer. Then Miles was standing on a box. He was pouring oil around the frame of the window. A swirl of wind brought the thick, rich smell of it down to Winnie's nostrils. Tuck handed up a tool, and Miles began to pry the nails securing the window frame. Miles knew carpenting. Miles could do the job. Winnie shivered and held tight onto Jessie's hand. One nail was free, then another. Tuck reached up to receive them as they came out one by one. A fourth nail screeched as it was pried up, and Miles poured more oil. From the front of the jailhouse, the constable yawned noisily and began to whistle. The whistling came nearer, and Miles dropped down. They heard the constable's footsteps coming up to May's cell. The bar door clanked. Then the footsteps receded, and the whistling grew fainter. An inner door shut, and the lamp glow disappeared. At once Miles was up again, and prying at the nails. An eighth was out, a ninth, a 10th. Winnie counted carefully, while behind her counting, her mind sang, "Stone walls do not make a prison." Miles handed down the prying tool. He grasped the bars of the window firmly, ready to pull, and stood poised. What was he waiting for? Thought Winnie. Why doesn't he? Then a flash of lightning, and soon after a crack of thunder. In the midst of the noise, Miles gave a mighty heave, but the window did not budge. The thunder ebbed, and Winnie's heart sank. What if it was all impossible? What if the window would never come out? What if... She looked over her shoulder at the dark shape of the gallows and shuddered. Again a flash of lightning, and this time a crashing burst of noise from the swirling sky. Miles yanked. The window frame sprang free, and still grasping it by the bars, he tumbled backwards off the box. The job was done. Two arms appeared in the hole left by the missing frame. May! Her head appeared. It was too dark to see her face. The window, what if it was too small for her to squeeze through? What if... But now her shoulders were out. She groaned softly. Another flash of lightning hit her face for an instant, and Winnie saw an expression there of deep concentration, the tip of tongue protruding and brows furrowed. Now Tuck was on the box, helping her, giving her his own shoulders to pull on. Miles and Jessie, close at his side, arms upstretched, eager to receive her bulk. Her hips were free now. Look out! Here she came, her skirts tearing on the rough edges of the boards, arms flailing, and they all in a heap on the ground. Another crash of thunder muffled Jessie's bursting, excellent laugh. May was free. Winnie clasped her trembling hands thankfully, and then the first drop of rain plopped precisely on the tip of her nose. The Tucks untangled themselves and turned to her. One by one, as the rain began, they drew her near to them, hugged her, kissed her. One by one she kissed them back. Was it rain on May's face? On Tuck's? Or was it tears? Jessie was last. He put his arms around her and hugged her tight and whispered the single word, "Remember." Then Miles was on the box again, lifting her. Her hands grasped the edges of the window. This time she waited with him. When the thunder came, it tore the sky apart with a roar, and as it came she pulled herself through and dropped to the cot inside, unharmed. She looked up at the open square and saw the frame with Miles' hands holding it. The next obliging roll of thunder saw its wedge once more into place. And then, would Miles put back the nails? She waited. Rain came in sheets now, riding the wind, flung crosswise through the night. Lightning crackled a brilliant, jagged streak, and thunder rattled the little building. The tension in the parched earth eased and vanished. Winnie felt it go. The muscles of her stomach loosened, and at once she was exhausted. Still she waited. Would Miles put back the nails? At last, standing tiptoe on the cot, she grasped the bars of the window, pulling herself up until she could see through. Rain blew into her face, but at the next flash of lightning, looking down, she saw that the yard was empty. And before the thunder followed in a pause, while wind and rain held back for one brief moment, she thought she heard, fading in the distance, the tinkling little melody of the music box. The Tucks, her darling Tucks, were gone. All right, so tomorrow we're going to finish up the book. We have one chapter left and an epilogue. So remember, an epilogue is the part of the book that happens after the story or the narrative itself is done being told, and it gives you more information as to what happened after the story is over. All right, talk to you guys tomorrow. Bye.